Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the announcement of the 2021 Martin Ennals Award finalists. This is the first time that we conduct our annual press conference virtually. We're now live from our website, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And you'll maybe hear me keep saying that I'm with someone or I'm turning to other speakers on this call, when actually I'm alone here in our offices in Geneva. I'm here just with Martin Ennals, the portrait that we keep in our office, the man who inspired the Martin Ennals Foundation 30 years ago. I'm thrilled to present this year's nominees to the award. I believe that all of you listening today, all of you who've joined us today, will find the stories of our finalists very compelling, very relatable, and inspiring, especially in the context of the lockdowns which many of us have lived through this year and the silencing of many voices who spoke out. This is the 28th time the Martin Ennals Award is bestowed. Since 1992, the award exists as a unique collaboration between 10 of the world's leading human rights organizations. The objective of the award is to provide a burst of support to human rights defenders who are at risk because of the work that they do. And over the years, the award has recognized a bit more than 50 defenders in more than 20 countries around the world. This year, 3 defenders promoting human rights in authoritarian states are nominated to the award. In a few moments, we'll hear more about their achievements in the People's Republic of China, in Turkmenistan, and in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The profiles and the causes that they advance are very different, but what we saw in common is that the authorities of their countries will go to great lengths to stop them. Authoritarian states such as these crack down on human rights defenders. They track them and survey them. They harass their families. They troll and discredit them online. They shut down the businesses or the organizations that these defenders start. And in some cases, they put defenders in jail. For their peaceful activism, they go to jail. And once they're detained and imprisoned, the physical and mental health of defenders is not guaranteed. Our 3 finalists this year are either in detention, under a travel ban, or otherwise silenced by the governments of their countries. So they can't be here with us today. In order to present them, though, we've asked 3 members of the award jury to provide us with some context about why these outstanding defenders were selected for the award. And we've also been able to pre-record messages from 1 finalist and 1 representative of a finalist. We're also joined by the manager of an international campaign to free our 3rd finalist. We'll hear from them for the next 35 to 40 minutes. Unfortunately, because our press conference is being live streamed, we can't have the same level of interaction with the press or take your questions the way that we'd like to. But on our YouTube streaming, the chat function is open and the Martin Ennals communications team is standing by to answer any questions that you may have. So I'm going to turn now to Gerald Staberok, who's Secretary General of the World Organization Against Torture. He's a member of the award jury, and he will provide a few remarks on our first finalist. Thank you, Gerald.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you to all that are joining this press briefing. It's my honor and pleasure to present to you the first finalist, Yu Wensheng from China. Who is Yu Wensheng? Yu Wensheng is a lawyer, initially a corporate lawyer, a lawyer that had, I think, from the start, a very strong conviction that the law is there to protect rights and that there are no rights if there's no right to defend. He early on started to do pro bono social work for social justice cases. He later on took very sensitive cases, or what are considered to be sensitive cases, freedom of religion, people who have been tortured and ill-treated, and lawyers' colleagues who have been persecuted themselves for nothing else but defending legal protection rights. It is an irony, a cynicism in many ways, that somebody who believes firmly in the rule of law as a rule of rights and fundamental notion of fairness has seen that the law is turned as a weapon against him. He has been arrested about 3 years, or I think on the day again, 3 years ago, in a rather secret procedure. He's been tried and convicted to 4 years of imprisonment that he had served for most of its part in solitary confinement. The trial was synonym to injustice. His lawyer was not notified. It was a closed trial. There are allegations of ill treatment. His right hand, he cannot use to write anymore. And I think there are very serious concern about his well-being. This case, I think, represents a number of things. It represents courage. It represents conviction, namely in the rule of law and the fundamental principle that no matter who you are, you deserve legal protection. And I think Yu Wensheng is part of a generation of lawyers who firmly believes in the rule of law in any place of the world. It's a case of intimidation, not only to him, but to his fraternity, and most importantly, to his family. There's no place in international law for something that could be called collective punishment, going against the family and other people. I sometimes, while looking at the case, think about the Middle Ages, when people were declared outlaws, vogelfrei, as we say in German, who had no right to protection. And we see the same thing here. Not only you're persecuted, your rights are not respected, your lawyer gets disbarred subsequently. And he himself has been a lawyer in other cases and therefore got disbarred and prosecuted here. I think it is a very important case of a personality that stands out in China and beyond. He stands for many other human rights lawyers in the world that are detained today. We alone have documented about 500 of such cases around the world. And I think we want to also show this pattern of abuse that takes place. I think there's also need for a sea change. People like Yu Wensheng are not enemies of the states. They love their countries. They're patriots. They do their casework for their country, not against their country. And I think the case is also important because it is China. And it is sensitive sometimes to raise Chinese human rights cases. We want to encourage states, the international community, not taboo these cases. Space for retreat will not be rewon. I think it is an important case also in the context of China playing a more significant role at the United Nations human rights machinery, claiming a different concept of cooperation. I think this case tells us cooperation on human rights can only be meaningful if there's meaningful protection of rights and meaningful protection of the right to defend. I'm absolutely thrilled by the courage and the life of this person that we have nominated. And I'd like you to hear first words from his wife. And you should know that his wife and children are threatened too. That's why I say there can't be collective punishment in cases like this. And I hand over to Isabel and to his wife, Shu Yan, to give her personal words.
我的丈夫于文生律师，被中国政府以煽动颠覆国家政权罪判刑4年。首先，我作为他的妻子，对中国政府这么重的判刑表示严重的不服和强烈的抗议。于文生律师他只是在履行宪法赋予的言论自由权和履行律师的职业权，他没有罪，应该立即被无罪释放。我希望和要求中国政府能够立即释放于文生律师，因为我认为于文生律师被关押的每一天都是不应该发生的，也是不公平、不法治的一种体现。中国它很多法律规定非常都有，甚至有的地方法律规定还挺好。但是他很多方面不去遵守，甚至很多方面去剥夺这些法律权利，这属于这种情况。当他对他有利的时候，他可能就去遵守这法律规定；当他不利的时候，或者没理没法的时候，他甚至就直接抛弃这些法律规定。另一方面，我想说，现在对 人权律师和人权捍卫者的打压是越来越严重。现在很多人权律师、人权捍卫者已经都不敢说话了，包括我的这个发言都承担着非常大的风险，我在努力的在坚持。首先，中国政府在抓捕于文生的过程中，他让孩子看到现场的场景，现场的场景是极其恐怖的。首先人非常多，其次那个情形非常的暴力，这个让未成年人看到，首先是对孩子的一种伤害。其次对我进行了3次的传唤，也和对家里进行5次的搜查。中国公安全部选在周6、周日或者夜间去执行这些事情，而周1到周5孩子上学的时候，他完全可以去做。我认为他是故意对孩子造成伤害。这个也是我一直对中国公安给予谴责和请求国际上对中国公安的行为给予谴责和要求他们纠正的事情。一是我坚定的相信于文生律师，和对中国政府打压关押于文生律师表示强烈的不服。第二句就是于文生我看到的于文生律师在公益的去帮助别人，他不是为了自己，他在帮助别人，所以我也想走他这条公益的路。第3点就是我看到了我的亲身经历，能够体会到很多其他的人权律师或者是维权的家属的困境，我亲身经历，我能感受到他们的困境，再加上我这经历看到了中国政府很多不遵守法律规定，甚至把很多法律权利剥夺的这个情形的发生，更加坚定了我去努力去自己维权和去尽力的去帮助其他的人权捍卫者。首先，我非常的高兴和荣幸的于文生律师能被马丁恩纳斯人权奖提名，我也非常的感谢。这个提名我认为不管是对于文生律师本人，还是现在中国的人权律师和人权捍卫者的整体情形都会起到非常大的帮助作用。首先对于文生律师这是对于文生律师之前对人权法治工作的一种支持和肯定。这个奖项也能帮助于文生律师未来更有力量去继续努力。同时这个奖项现在国内很多人权律师、人权捍卫者说话都不敢说话，都面临着很大的危险和风险。如果于文生律师能获得尊敬的马丁恩纳斯人权奖，对中国国内的人权律师和人权捍卫者也会起到很大的鼓舞作用。我非常感谢。
Thank you so much, Shuyan, and thank you, Gerald, for your contributions, especially Shuyan for the effort that you took to record this video in advance of the press conference. And I'm very happy now to turn over to Friedhelm Weinberg, Executive Director of HureDocs, for his remarks and perspective on our second finalist in Turkmenistan.
Thank you, Isabel. First, I'd like to speak a little bit about the context in which our finalist is working in, as it's one of the less known ones among the finalists. So Turkmenistan is a country in which officially there is no COVID-19. It is one of the few countries that in fact has reported 0 cases to the World Health Organization. And the truth is, of course, that Turkmenistan has not been spared. And the country's mismanagement of the pandemic has resulted in, for example, teachers being asked to support their students by providing them with protection supplies that they have to pay from their personal expenses. And that when the teachers will not do this, they will face repercussions from the states. And it's this pandemic that has also exacerbated food shortages that had already affected people in recent years. It has resulted in hospitals being overwhelmed and much more. And the blatant lies about the pandemic in Turkmenistan are not an accident. In the country, the truth is routinely hidden. It is denied and covered by those in power. And those who do report the truth, whether as a journalist or source, are vulnerable to harassment. They get beaten, prosecuted, and jailed. And it is in this context that Soltan Achilova, our finalist this year, is reporting on what is happening. And she is an independent freelance journalist. In the wider context, in the 2020 edition of the World Press Freedom Index of Reporters Without Borders, only North Korea was considered less free than Turkmenistan. In 2019, Turkmenistan was last place, the 180th in the ranking. So in short, Turkmenistan is one of the most difficult, most dangerous places to be an independent journalist. So quite clearly, Soltan Achilova is a courageous person just by virtue of being an independent journalist. Getting the real story out is no small feat, and she's taken enormous risk for which she has repeatedly faced consequences. But then you might wonder, what are the scoops that she's landing? And you'd be surprised that her reporting is very human. It's incredibly human. She's not covering grand politics. She's covering the everyday. In her own words, she's taking, quote, people queuing for food or queuing for cash machines. She's taking, again, quote, recordings where people talk about their problems. That's it. This is the everyday where systematic violations of human rights take place. And that's where the state is clearly failing to live up to its obligations, and it's people that face the consequences. And the focus in Soltan Achilova's reporting is no accident if we think of how it started. It started by her being denied of her rights. Because for most of her life, Soltan was a bookkeeper. She was not a journalist. When in 2006, the house she was living in was destroyed by the authorities, that's when she began to speak out, to demand answers and restitution. Then Soltan was already in her late 50s. But she then turned to reporting what happened to others that were also evicted from their houses, that faced the lack of food and clean water, that could not access healthcare when they needed it. And now she's over 70 years old. She's retired from her bookkeeping job, but she keeps reporting. For that, in recent years, she has faced an ever-growing number of attacks. She was intimidated, she was arrested illegally, she had travel bans put on her, she's been abused physically. And the attacks, again, happen in everyday places. They happen in food shops, they happen on bazaars, they happen at ceremonies to celebrate Victory Day. And this goes to show that, if anything, Soltan mingles with the people, and that is where she is so dangerously close to the truth. Soltan has continued to report and has been getting the news out despite attacks on her and her family. The media outlets she works for are routinely facing digital censorship, they're blocked. Her colleagues face arrest, or they have to move into exile. And she has made tangible just how people experience the violation of their rights. We can only hope that this has led to improvements as a response to her report. But we know as a minimum that she has allowed people to be heard when they are supposed to stay silent. And she's also not been shy to push back when she saw international reporting that did not match what she was seeing, what people told her. So she really cares about the truth. In many ways, Soltan is emblematic that anyone can be a human rights defender in every situation. Again, for most of her life, she was not a journalist. It was her personal experience that changed everything. But not everyone decides to take the bold steps, to take the risk that Soltan is taking every day as an independent freelance journalist. She shows us that we don't need to be special, powerful, or have a strong institution behind us. We need to be dedicated, we need to dare, we need to be compassionate and care about the truth. She has faced very serious repercussion for what she does. She's been harassed, she's been threatened, she's been banned from traveling abroad. So by choosing her as a finalist, we hope this is a message to show that the world is watching, that we stand in solidarity and we listen as Soltan breaks the silence. So in that sense, it's a great pleasure to now hear from her, even though it is a recording, but hear in her own words of what she's doing and what it means to her.
Мне 71 лет. Я прожила последние 30 лет своей жизни в ожиданиях лучших дней, но она не наступила. Мы не живем, а выживаем, но человек не теряет надежды. Ситуация с правами человека в нашей стране очень плачущая. Правоохранительные органы в области прав человека совершенно не работают. Гражданам страны нет доступа ни в одной правозащитной организации, чтобы достичь свои права. Везде коррупция и взяточество. Чтобы быть правозащитником в нашей стране, нужно быть готовым на все. На слежки, на арест, на давление членов семьи, на полном лишении твой прав в стране. Туркменистан на самом деле является одной из самых закрытых стран мира. Обычные граждане Туркменистана за последние 5-6 лет живут в поисках куска хлеба. Мое текущее положение по-прежнему. Работаю с риском. Да, я могу информировать мир о Туркменистане, чтобы она не стоила мне. В среднем сайт посещает около 30 тысяч уникальных посетителей в день. Для страны, где интернет контролируется, это много. Насколько я знаю, в редакции работает 3-4 человека. СМИ так контролируются властями, потому что они боятся демократию, которая для них возможность потерять власть. Полный контроль над СМИ – это означает, что в Туркменистане СМИ на полном контроле у властей, но нет доступа к социальным сетям. Все заблокировано. Государственные СМИ освещают только похвальные темы, почти одного содержания, про достижения в стране, которые даже не имеются в действительности. Жизнь граждан на полном контроле властей. У простых граждан нет никакой права говорить правду, требовать свои права, пользоваться соцсетями или сотрудничать с зарубежными СМИ. Я занимаюсь журналистикой за то, что эта работа очень нравится мне. Я всегда среди людей. Я вижу истинное положение в стране и могу рассказать об этом публику. Цель публикации тоже такой же, чтобы публика знала о настоящем положении в стране. Чтобы быть независимым журналистом в Туркменистане, журналист должен быть готов на все. На преследование, на нападение, на давление членов семьи, даже на арест. Власти говорят, что COVID-19 не проник в страну, но это неправда. COVID уже больше полгода как проник в страну. Ежедневно поступают сведения о заболевших и умерших среди населения. Количество случаев недоступны населению, так как не только не разглашается количество заболевших и умерших, об этом говорить запрещено. По мнению властей, в Туркменистане не должно быть негативных случаев, хотя она не зависит от человека, это ведь закон природы. Но мы-то видим и слышим, что уходят знакомые, близкие, друзья. Население в страхе, что эта зараза завтра может достичь каждого. Да, я составляла материалы о положении коронавируса в стране, что факт, что она имеется в наличии. Но чтобы я близко ознакомливался с больными или с положением в больницах, такого возможности у меня не было. Все скрывается в Туркменистане. Что мне необходимо, это защита со стороны международных правозащитных организаций, которые я получаю постоянно. Это чтобы власти перестали преследовать меня и членов моих семей. Чтобы я получала аккредитацию, которую туркменские власти отказывали мне уже много лет. Я сталкивалась с ответными мерами со стороны властей. По настоящее время это угрозы, нападения, преследования меня и моих близких друзей. Отнимали у меня спецаппаратуры, отрезан международные телефонные интернет-связи. Прослушиваются телефонные разговоры. С кем я разговариваю по телефону, спецслужбы вызывают этого человека и тоже угрожают. Если этот человек будет иметь дело со мной, что ему будет плохо. Такими образами они хотят лишать меня от получения ценных сведений. Да, иногда приходит мысль оставить эту работу. Это связано с возрастом, со здоровьем. Но меня опять подталкивает продолжать эту работу. То, что творится в стране, это беззаконие. Но ведь кто-то должен рассказать миру настоящее положение в стране.
Thank you so much, Soltan and Friedhelm, for your remarks. I am thrilled to hear and see Soltan in this manner, and I just wanted to make a quick note to everyone who's following that we had a lot of difficulty to reach Soltan. This is one of the first times that we've been able to hear her, and I'm so grateful that Soltan breaks the silence, as Friedhelm said. I'll hand over now to Phil Lynch, who's here with us from the International Service of Human Rights that he is the executive director of. He will interview Uma Mishra, who's also joined us for the press conference. She is the manager of the international campaign to free our third finalist in Saudi Arabia. Over to you, Phil.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to present the third finalist for the Martin Ennals Award, Loujain AlHathloul. Loujain is a woman, a daughter, a sister, dedicated to promoting human rights, and particularly women's rights in Saudi Arabia. She's dedicated herself to the push to ensure that women are treated equally as men in her country, that women can enjoy dignity, that women can exercise some control and autonomy over their lives and their bodies, that women can fulfill their potential, that women can have a seat at the table. In particular, she's advocated for the right of women to drive and has advocated against the oppressive male guardianship system, which enables men, and in many instances, husbands and sons, to exert control over their daughters and wives. For exercising these rights and for demanding that women be treated equally and have a seat at the table, Loujain has been arrested multiple times. She's been arbitrarily detained since May of 2018.
Sorry for that, Phil. Looks like we have a technical glitch. Give me a second. Sorry to everyone who's listening. We've got a glitch, of course. There needs to be at least one on this press conference. Let's give it a minute. Backup system works it out. Phil, I'm told that the glitch is only on our side, so we can continue. The audience can't hear the doubling up of the sound, so if it's okay with you to continue.
Well, thank you. So Loujain, for her work to promote women's rights and gender equality, has been arbitrarily detained since May of 2018. In detention, she's been subject to torture and ill treatment, including waterboarding, including sexual harassment and threats. She's been offered the chance for her liberty in return for denouncing or resiling from her allegations and the fact that she has suffered torture and ill treatment, but is so committed to the issue of women's rights and accountability that she has maintained her position, has continued to be arbitrarily detained because of her courage in maintaining that she's been subject to torture and ill treatment, and that it is imperative that the Saudi authorities be held to account in that regard. Among other advocacy activities at the national and the international level, Loujain was involved in briefing the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women on the human rights situation, and in particular the women's rights situation in Saudi Arabia. It's on the basis of that briefing, of telling the international community the truth about women's rights in Saudi Arabia, that she has been detained. That was one of the charges levelled against her. That was part of the evidence that was used to detain and ultimately to charge and prosecute and sentence her. That is a paradigm example of reprisal, the kind of activity of retaliation that states such as Saudi Arabia, similarly states such as China and Turkmenistan, engage in to punish and to deter victims, rights holders, witnesses, human rights defenders from engaging with the UN, from speaking truth to power. And it is absolutely imperative in those circumstances that Saudi Arabia be held to account, that Saudi Arabia be held to account by the international community, by states, by the UN human rights mechanisms, including through the establishment of a special mechanism on the situation of human rights in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has demonstrated itself to be a country which is particularly concerned about its international reputation. It's invested substantially in sports washing its human rights record, in seeking to host events that give it some kind of legitimacy at the international table. In those circumstances, awards like the Martin Ennals Award, human rights organisations speaking up, governments speaking up about the situation of women human rights defenders like Loujain is absolutely critical. It increases the pressure on Saudi Arabia, and we know that that pressure has results. It has resulted in the release of some women from detention. It has resulted in the amelioration of some conditions of detention. Sadly, that's not the case for Loujain, who remains arbitrarily detained and continues to be subject to ill treatment and denied fundamental rights in detention, including the right to adequate healthcare. I'm now very pleased to hand over to Uma, who will tell you a bit more about Loujain's inspiring work.
Thank you so much, Phil, for your very kind introduction of Loujain and her continued fight. Loujain's current situation is that she, as Phil said, has been in pretrial detention for nearly 3 years. Loujain's trial recommenced on the 26th of November, when after nearly 3 years of pretrial detention, her case was moved to a specialized criminal court, which is also known as the Terrorism Court. In just 1 month, the specialized criminal court fast-tracked the trial process to include an investigation into torture allegations. During this time, Loujain and her parents, who are her lawyers, had sometimes less than 24 hours notice to prepare for the trial process. Additionally, during the trial process, the charges against Loujain were changed without her knowledge. In December of 2020, the criminal court denied any torture for lack of evidence. The court said that they cannot check the camera recordings as they are wiped after 45 days. However, they refuse to give the report where they say this to Loujain or her family. Additionally, the Human Rights Commission in Saudi Arabia visited Loujain in prison during the time where Loujain was still bruised and her body still shaking, and she reported the torture to them. The Human Rights Commission replied that they could not protect Loujain or do anything with her report. Instead, now on Twitter, the Human Rights Commission mutes and blocks anybody who asks about Loujain. On the 28th of December, 2020, Loujain was sentenced by the Specialized Criminal Court to 5 years and 8 months in prison. The sentence carries with it a 5-year travel ban, 3 years of probation, during which time Loujain can be re-imprisoned for any perceived criminal activity. The sentence also carries with it a lifelong labeling of Loujain as a terrorist. We are clear that this is not freedom. The Martin Ennals Award for Human Rights Defenders nominations represents a great deal to Loujain and her family. The family of Loujain recognizes that silence is the most dangerous thing on their part. When the family was silent in the beginning of Loujain's imprisonment, Loujain was tortured. It is only through constant awareness raising and advocacy building that Loujain's story continues to be shared and known, and the number of calls for unconditional freedom continues to grow. The Martin Ennals nomination is important because it recognizes Loujain for her activism, for her work, for her voice, and her commitment. It recognizes that although Loujain cannot speak and use her own voice, that her legacy and her activism are never forgotten, no matter how much the Saudi government wishes for this reality. What is the hope for the future? There is much hope. The family of Loujain will never stop fighting until Loujain and her family are unconditionally free. Unconditional freedom means no imprisonment, no travel ban for both Loujain or her family, no probation, and no threat of re-imprisonment. Hope for the future means that Loujain is able to continue her advocacy and activism without threat, harm, intimidation, or risk of reprisal. Hope for the future is that Loujain and her family are able to live free. Thank you so much, Phil.
Thank you, Uma. Thank you so much for being here with us today and sharing that message about unconditional freedom for Loujain and her family. And thank you, Phil, for providing the context. The speakers have all been terrific, and I, for one, have very little to add, just to underscore that what the Martin Ennals Award is about is celebrating the achievements of our defenders. And whereas this year we have some very tough situations for defenders in authoritarian states, they've also achieved so much. They have made tremendous contributions to their societies, to the freedom of speech, to the rule of law, to women and girls' rights, and to dignity in these countries. And that's why they've been selected as well, because we would like to honor and recognize how much they themselves have given us, have given their countries, and for the human rights movement overall. So I'd like to conclude by inviting everyone who's listening and all of your friends and everybody that you know to join us in this celebration. Our award ceremony is going to take place in honor of Soltan, Loujain, and Wensheng next 11 February at 1800 hours Central European Time. So that's Thursday, February 11th at 6 p.m. Geneva time. Our ceremony had to adapt to COVID, just like this press conference, just like most aspects of our lives now here in Europe. We're going to conduct a virtual celebration online that everyone is welcome to join. And we very much want you to join us because this year's slogan is "Nothing can stop us from celebrating human rights defenders." After everything that's happened this year and all of the perceived obstacles, Martin Ennals Foundation, together with our partner in the ceremony, the City of Geneva, together with the 10 jury member organizations, our board, and all of our donors, decided that absolutely nothing was going to stop us from raising up these cases and shining a light on these tremendous defenders. So we're going to be joined at the ceremony by local voices and artists in Geneva, but also people from around the world who've contributed their pens, their voices, their movement, whatever it is they've got to make this really a joyful moment. So see you there, and thank you again for joining us today. Make sure to follow us on social media. Until then, thank you again. Bye-bye. Have a